Bob is no stranger to Louisiana politicos. He's worked for many of them, including Russell Long, who was his first biographical target, Legacy to Power. And he's also worked for Senator John Breaux for many years. He worked in the campaign of Bennett Johnston against David Duke in 1990, and he was a key player in the Blanco administration when Kathleen Blanco was governor for one term. And he has been called by none other than Tyler Bridges as Louisiana's premier historian, and he's here, I'm sure, not only to field questions about his latest book, but also about the world at large. Bob Mann.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for inviting me today. I'm really excited to talk about this this new book of mine about Jimmie Davis. I get asked a little bit about why I wanted to write a book about a song. I'm a political historian mostly, and I've never written about music, although I'm a fan of country music. I grew up on country music and bluegrass and all that, but it's not something I've written a lot about or really written about at all. And the answer to that is that I didn't start out to write a book about music so much. I thought it was going to be a book about how Davis had used his music to become governor, to launch his political career. And through the research and the writing of the book, I realized I was writing not only a story of politics in Louisiana in the 1940s and 50s and 60s through the lens of this song and through the lens of Davis's musical career, but I was also writing a part of country music history, because what I didn't fully understand, what I didn't understand at all when I began to write the book, research the book, is that it was Davis's importance to early country music. And I'll put it this way: when I began the book, I thought I was going to be writing about a guy who was in the Country Music Hall of Fame, and he is, by the way, in the Country Music Hall of Fame, which is a rare honor in country music, the highest honor in country music. And it is, but I always thought he was there because he had written this song, "You Are My Sunshine," that had become an international hit, and an enduring a song that all of us know, and many of us have had sung to us as children, or we've sung this song to our children, our grandchildren when they were little. It's a lot of people use it as a lullaby. And I thought he was kind of a one-hit wonder who used this song to get elected governor, and that it was really that music was a stepping stone to politics. And what I learned is that it was really the exact opposite. That music was the most important thing to Davis. That politics was a way to support his musical habit, not the other way around. And I'll give you a couple of examples of this. I'm going to get to what I think is the most interesting part of the book, at least the part I enjoyed the most, which was writing about the 1944 governor's race when he won the campaign for the first time. But Davis started his musical career playing guitar on the streets of Alexandria when he was a student at Louisiana College in Pineville. And then he played guitar for donations, for coins on the streets of Baton Rouge when he was at LSU working on his master's degree in 1924. And then by 1929, when he was living in Shreveport as a teacher, and as a clerk of court there, assistant clerk of court, he started a musical career. He got a recording contract and started making records. And so Davis, his first recording was in 1929, and he was in the music business as a blues singer in the beginning, as a hillbilly country singer in sort of the middle of his career in the 1940s, and as a gospel singer for the rest of his life. But he had a musical career where he was performing. Singing and making music from the early 1920s through 2000. I mean, this may be the longest active career in country music of anybody. It's a long career. He only spent 13 years in elective office, and so the music was really the constant in his life. And in those days, and when he got a band together in the late 20s and early 30s. You couldn't make any money in hillbilly music. It was not really a popular genre across the country and around the world. It was a struggle to make a living. It was a struggle to just, if you were just a person playing a guitar by yourself, but if you had a band, there was almost no way to support a band or keep a band together, because if you found a good fiddle player, or you found a good guitar player or steel guitar player or whatever, they were going to not be making any money playing music for you, and the minute they got a job in the oil field somewhere else or got a better job, they were going to be gone. And so it was really important to Davis that he keep his band together. He had a pretty good band that he had found and it had built. And so he gets himself elected in 1938, when he finally gets his first elective office as the public safety commissioner for Shreveport, where he's in charge of the fire and police departments. He uses that position to solidify his band, and he makes all his band members police officers. And that is not something you could get away with today. I mean, that would definitely be probably a violation of the law to do something like that. But in those days, it wasn't. And he did it because he wanted to keep the band together. And while maybe it's ethically questionable, to me it signaled how important the music was to him, because he wanted to keep a band together. He wanted to find a good band and keep them together. And by the way, when he gets elected governor in 1944, he gives all his band members state jobs. And he does the same in 1960. And again, you couldn't do that today ethically. You wouldn't be able to get away with that probably. Or you wouldn't be able to do it as overtly as he did it. But Davis did it, and he did it because he wanted to keep the band together, because he had really good musicians, and he wanted to keep them, and he wanted to pay them well, and there wasn't enough money to be made, even when he was an international music star. So, and I'll kind of circle around to this, but I came to really respect Davis more as a musician than a politician, because I think it was the part of his professional life that he was most committed to, and he's in the Country Music Hall of Fame because of his music, not because of his politics. And I didn't appreciate that in the beginning. But I want to talk about the chapter of the book that I had the most fun writing about, because it involved Jimmie Davis and Earl Long and some really colorful people who were running for governor in 1944. Sam Jones is the incumbent governor, and in those days the governors are term limited. They can only serve one. They can't succeed themselves. So Sam Jones has talked Jimmie Davis into getting into the race to sort of carry on the reform tradition that Jones had instituted after the Louisiana scandals of 1939, 1940, when a lot of the former Long people went to prison, which is, by the way, the subject of the book that I'm finishing up right now. And Sam Jones talks Davis into getting in the race, and by the time Sam Jones persuades Davis to get into the race in 1943, Davis hasn't finished a year as Public Service Commissioner of North Louisiana. That's the job that Huey Long had and got elected governor using the position of Public Service Commissioner. It's the job that John McKithen would later use to become governor of Louisiana. This was a real stepping stone, a very successful, tried and true way to get yourself elected governor. But Davis hadn't even been in office for 6 months until he started to run for governor. And that would not be something that a politician like Davis or anybody would do unless he already had some notoriety. And that notoriety he had was not because of his public service in Shreveport city government or what he had done on the Public Service Commission, because he hadn't built a record there yet. It was almost 100% built on his music career and his notoriety as a hillbilly music star. And by 1944, he has had a lot of hits to his name. In 1938, he had a national hit with a song called "It Makes No Difference Now," and another hit called "Nobody's Darling But Mine" in 1935. Those are still, by the way, those of you who enjoy country music and have been listening to country music for a while, those are still considered standards, country music standards, that dozens and dozens of big stars have recorded. And he's recorded a lot of other songs that are national and international hits, but none of them is bigger than "You Are My Sunshine," which he had released in March of 1940 and quickly became an international hit. Other people recorded it. Tex Ritter, Gene Autry sang it in their movies. Most notably, Bing Crosby recorded it in 1941 and made a big international hit out of it. The Davis's version of the song it may not be the biggest hit. I thought it was, but I've later adjusted my assessment of how big Davis's version of it was. But whether it was the big hit of the was the biggest hit that Sunshine had, and all the hundreds of people have recorded it, the fact is that it is the recording that most people recognize as sort of the seminal recording, even though it wasn't the first recording of Sunshine. But it's the recording of Sunshine that's in the national, that's in the Library of Congress Registry of Significant Cultural Recordings. It's the version of the song that is in the Grammy Hall of Fame. And this is the version of the song that when Davis was going around singing at his rallies, that people most wanted to hear because they associated Sunshine with Jimmie Davis more than anybody else.
The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. But when I woke, dear, I was mistaken, and I hung my head and cried. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
So, he's known around the world. That song is known around the world. It's the song that King George in England says is his favorite song. Winston Churchill is asking American soldiers to sing the song for him when he encounters them on a beach in Morocco. I mean, it's a huge international hit, and Jimmie Davis is recognized as the guy who wrote the song and brought it to popularity. So he's running for governor on his music career. Most of his rallies are music, maybe about 10 minutes of speeches. The rest of it is just his band. And by the way, he's got this really good band. There are two members of that band who are now in the Country Music Hall of Fame, and a third who I think belongs in the Country Music Hall of Fame, Moon Mullican, who is his piano player. But this is probably the best band in country music at the time, and Davis has got this incredible unit that people are coming out to hear and listen, and not to hear him talk about politics, but to hear him sing, because he's an international star by that time. But he's got a couple of problems, and one of them is that Earl Long and Jimmy Morrison, who's the congressman from around here, who's also in the race, they know something about Davis's early political career, or I'm sorry, his early musical career, that a lot of people who were coming out to hear him sing did not know, and that was that early in his recording career, when he was first recording music, he recorded probably some of the most salacious, sexually charged songs in American music history. I mean, some of the songs that Davis recorded, Jim, you would get cited by the FCC if you played them on your show. But they were marketed to mostly a black listening audience, and this is before the days of music like this records being played on the radio. This is before the days of, obviously these devices where you could listen to music on streaming. If you wanted to listen to one of Jimmie Davis's songs in those days, you had to hear him sing it in person, sing it live on the radio, and he wasn't singing these songs live on the radio in Shreveport. You had to go to the record store and buy these records, and these were primarily records marketed to an African American audience. So white voters didn't know about this, and Earl Long and Jimmy Morrison were trying to correct that problem by bringing these salacious songs to the attention of the public. And some of the titles are just enough. My favorite title is the Oregon Grinder Blues, and I won't go into the song too much except to say that the organ that he's talking about grinding is not a musical instrument. Let's just put it that way. But my second favorite title is the one I'm going to play just a little bit for you right now. It's called "She's a Hum-Dum-Dinger from Dingersville." And if you listen to the wording of it, he has this girlfriend that he takes to church, and the preacher is enamored with her and throws his Bible down and runs off with his girlfriend. So anyway, here's a little bit of "Hum-Dum-Dinger from Dingersville."
Girls, but you ought to see mine. She ain't so good looking, but she dressed so fine. She's long, she's tall, she's a handsome queen. She's got ways like a mowing machine. She's a hum-dum-dinger from Dingersville.
you know, there was other ones, a lot of another song that I love the lyrics he was talking about, called High Behind Blues, and no matter how big she is, I'm the man who can hold her down. So I mean, this is stuff that's pretty salacious, and if people knew about it, they would probably maybe reconsider their decision to vote for Davis. But what he's got going for him is this is the image that he's curated for almost 10 years now, and people in the public consciousness is Jimmie Davis as the wholesome singer of these songs like "You Are My Sunshine," who's played a sympathetic, wholesome character in a couple of movies, and it's kind of like Ronald Reagan. By the time he runs for president, his public image is sort of solidified by his image in the movies and entertainment. And Davis kind of has that same kind of advantage that people know him. This first impression is of this wholesomeness and not these salacious songs. And the other part of it is that you can't print the words to most of these songs in the newspaper. You can't play them on the radio, and if you played them even at a rally, you might get in some trouble for playing sexually suggestive music in public to children. So the opponents have a hard time overcoming that. So Davis kind of dodges that bullet, but there's another bullet that he's also got to worry about, and that is that he's being touted as this cowboy bard, this person who's written some of the most popular songs in the world. First among them, "You Are My Sunshine," but several others that are really popular. And he's the guy that wrote "You Are My Sunshine." He's the guy who wrote the song that Bing Crosby made into an international hit. He's the guy that wrote the song that's being sung in all these movies. And the problem is that Jimmie Davis didn't actually write the song. I think I mentioned earlier that he was the third artist to record the song. There were two groups in Georgia who recorded the song in the summer of 1939, and the second of those groups was a group called the Rice Brothers Gang, Paul and Hope Rice, and they recorded the song in September of 1939 in Atlanta. And then a couple of weeks later, they moved to Shreveport, and they got a radio show on KVKH where Jimmie Davis also had a radio show. And they were playing on the Saturday Night Roundup, which is the precursor to the Louisiana Hayride. Jimmie Davis was also performing on the Saturday Night Roundup. And these guys were singing "You Are My Sunshine" that they had just recorded. And I believe that's the first time Jimmie Davis ever heard "You Are My Sunshine." By December of that year, one of the brothers, the guy who claimed to have written the song, his wife got sick and he needed money to pay her medical bills. And so Davis and his steel guitar player, Charlie Mitchell, go to Paul Rice and offer him $35 to the rights to "You Are My Sunshine." And he sells them to them. So for $17.50, Jimmie Davis acquired the rights to one of the world's most popular and famous and lucrative songs. But Paul Rice didn't write the song either. That's the problem. He thought Paul Rice wrote the song. Paul Rice said he wrote the song, but Paul Rice didn't write the song. And I determined through my research that this guy wrote the song. His name was Oliver Hood. He was a mill worker, a mandolin player, and music teacher in LaGrange, Georgia. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I were in LaGrange, and we drove by his house that's still standing. He wrote the song in the late 20s, early 30s, was singing it in and around. A lot of people will testify that, did testify that they heard him sing the song in the early 30s, but he never copyrighted it. He was an unsophisticated guy. He didn't copyright any of his music, and it just got away from him. And that's an interesting story that I don't have time to tell, but it involved having an affair with a young woman who joined some other bands. I think she's the one that introduced these other groups to the song that she'd heard her former boyfriend sing. But the interesting part about this to me is that people, again, voters wanted to believe this image. It just reminds me so much of how important image is, and how more important image is often than reality in politics, especially, that people are really invested in an image of a person. I think it's one of the reasons why Donald Trump is in the White House, because of the image that he cultivated on a television show about that he was a brilliant, shrewd, talented business person in a television show that was not really, it was not portraying reality. And this was not the reality of Jimmie Davis's life in many ways, but it's the image that people knew and bought and wanted to believe in. And I think that's the key part of this, that people wanted to believe in this, and nothing was going to dissuade them from buying this image and accepting this image, even in the 1940s when popular culture, television was in its infancy, and so it wasn't as strong as it is now, but even then it was a pretty strong thing. And so I'll fast forward to today when I'm going around talking about the book. I remind people that the only reason that You Are My Sunshine is the state song is because of Jimmie Davis, because we believe that a governor wrote it when he was at LSU, which is the way Davis almost always told the story. And the song, as you may have noticed, does not mention Louisiana at all. In fact, I think it may be the only state song in all the 50 states that the song of that state does not mention the state. And there's a reason for that, is because we believe that this very popular song was written by a Louisiana governor. So I'm not here to say we should not make Sunshine a Louisiana state song, but I am here to say that I think it's just interesting to me how the image that he crafted, that he cultivated in the late 30s, early 40s, sustained this myth and this romantic belief about him as the most gifted songwriter of his generation. That the Louisiana legislature a couple of years ago jettisoned the other song, and now You Are My Sunshine is our only state song. It had been one of two for almost 50 years. So I want to just wrap up and say that kind of where I began. I really thought that Davis was a politician who used music as a stepping stone to politics, and it was really the other way around. He really was committed to his music. None of what I've written, to me, is meant to disparage Davis as a musician. The only place where I'm maybe a little bit critical of Davis was in his civil rights record in the 60s, and maybe his aggressive song buying practices where he was buying songs of others and claiming that he wrote them. But having said all that, country music would not be the worldwide juggernaut that it is today if it weren't for people like Jimmie Davis, Roy Acuff, the Carter family, those early country music stars, Jimmy Rogers, people like that who were in the late 20s, early 30s, were going around making this music, it's called hillbilly. It was not a recognized genre. Billboard did not start ranking country music, they didn't start publishing a ranked chart of the hits of country music until the mid-1940s, because they didn't recognize it as a respectable genre. They called it hillbilly, and it was pretty widely known as hillbilly music into the late 1940s. And that was a pejorative in a lot of ways. There were few artists who really liked that to be known as a hillbilly artist. I think maybe Roy Acuff was the only person that really embraced that. So he's a founding father of country music. If it weren't for Davis laboring in near poverty and having to take other jobs to support his musical habit to raise this genre up, I mean, country music would not be this juggernaut that it is today. He really is a founding father of country music, and for that reason, more so than whether he wrote You Are My Sunshine or not, I think and whether he became elected governor or not, or had a distinguished political career in Louisiana politics or not, I think Jimmie Davis clearly belongs to the Country Music Hall of Fame. He was only the 20th person elected to the Hall of Fame in 1972, and I think he earned his spot in there without a question. Thanks very much. I would love to take any questions you might have about any of this. Yeah. Thank you. You have a question, John? Where did I find the old songs? Well, so the really cool thing is I did buy a box set of, I think it was 8 or 9 DVDs or CDs of Davis's music that was put out by this German music record company called Bear Music. But every song that I write about in the book, by every single artist, every one of these songs, from his early music that was the stuff that I was talking about was so salacious, to his later recordings, every song that I mentioned in the book is, you can find it on YouTube. They've all been uploaded to YouTube, and so that's where I found a lot of the music, was just on YouTube. And some other, there are a number of other music sites where some older recordings are curated out. And then I bought a number of records, 78 records, on off of eBay. There's a lot of that stuff that's sold on eBay. For example, I bought the first recording of "You Are My Sunshine," which was by a group called the Pine Ridge Boys. This was the very first time it was recorded in 1939, and I think I bought it for $10. You can't find on eBay that I could ever find a copy of Jimmie Davis's version for sale. But his earlier recordings, like "Hum Dum Dinger" from Dingersville and "Organ Grinder Blues" and "High Behind Blues" and all that kind of stuff, those, if you find those on eBay, you'll pay $400 or $500 per record for those. Those are really valuable, coveted recordings of his. Thanks for the question. Yes, sir.
You have a very distinguished career, and it's very interesting as you're going back through all of this time, maybe particularly for this group. But when you live life, whether it's getting married or something happened, you graduate from college or something, you're living life and you don't notice it.
Mm-hmm.
We were educated in economics, keep our ears to that kind of information.
Mm-hmm.
Louisiana's 4-point-something million is projected that kids that are born today will be 75 years of age at the turn of the century. Of course, 10 years ago it'd be 85. Louisiana's projected to go down to about 2.5 million people, while states like Louisiana, California continue. What is your thought, or what can you tell us, because you did mention Donald Trump, with that change, that time coming forward to here, in your experience, what can you say about the fact that the future really leaves a lot of empty homes?
Yeah, so the question is about the demographics of the state and declining demographics. I think you didn't use the word, but the brain drain, the young people leaving, and just the population decline, and that all the economic consequences that will come from that. I mean, I've written about that a lot when I had a column in the Times-Picayune. I know the Advocate has done a lot of reporting on that over the decades. You know, and they were writing about that decades ago. And I could probably talk for 30 minutes on that. But what I will say, and I was talking to somebody earlier, actually your seatmate here, about my feeling that sometimes, you know, the frustration that I have with Louisiana politics, and all the problems we have here, and sometimes my desire to get out of here and go somewhere else. And maybe we will, maybe we won't, probably depending on where our grandchildren live. But I'm frustrated by it, and I toggle back and forth between just saying to heck with it and leaving the state, and or staying here and trying to do something about it and fight for the future. And so while I'm here, I'm going to fight for our future, like I know all of you are. But I just want to add this, is that one of the reasons why I wrote this book, and one of the reasons why I wrote my book on Huey Long and LSU, and the reason I'm writing the book on the Louisiana scandals of 1940, is because I'm interested in Louisiana history and politics, but because I also, if I'm going to be here, I want to write about this place. I want to celebrate the history and the culture and the politics of Louisiana while I'm here. And there's just so much about the state that's interesting to me, fascinating culturally and politically, that I want to be a person who celebrates that as much as I can. I don't want to ignore the bad stuff, and I don't think we should, but to the extent that I can, I want to also celebrate the fact that we've got some. I mean, this book this book that I'm writing now, I get to every day I get to sit down and write about Earl Long and Jimmy Morrison and Dick Lesh and Huey Long and Sam Jones and all these really fascinating characters in our state's history who, some are villains and some are not, but they're all just fascinating people. And part of me says, boy, our politics has just gotten really boring in this state. We've got all these plain vanilla people up in Washington leading us. Maybe it would be nice to have some honest, colorful politicians for a change, but I do want to celebrate the state and celebrate its political history as much as I can while I'm here, because I think it's a fascinating, maybe the most interesting state politically and culturally in the Union, and we need to know more about that.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Yeah.
What would you change in the state if you could?
What would I change in the state if I could? This is almost an esoteric answer to that question, but I think and I've written a little bit about this. I think that most Louisiana people, politicians and otherwise, we approach everything from a scarcity perspective, that we've got limited resources, we can only afford to do so much, so what are we going to do with these limited resources? And I think I would recognize that we have the resource to do whatever we really wanted to do. I mean, you know, so in this community, if we want a national championship football team, so we found the money to pay a football coach $10 million, but we can't find the money to build a new library. It's not a matter of the resources not being there, it's a matter of our priorities. And so when our priority is football, we shower it with money, but our priority is not a new library, or it's not a well-funded university system and education system and all of that. And when it's our priority, we find the money. We are not poor as we think we are. We've talked ourselves into believing we can only afford to do so much. Yes, sir. Randy?
Bob, at one point, I would say that certainly Senator Kennedy is.
Okay, I'll grant you Kennedy. Yeah.
The flag now for,
yeah.
our creative politicians.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you researched Gus Wiles' book.
Yeah.
Did you see any differences? It was a biography, and I know his sources were different than your sources.
Yeah.
And his biography titled "You Are My Sunshine."
Right.
Did you see any updates or new information or differences?
Yeah. So he's asking about, the question is about the biography of Jimmie Davis that Gus Wiles, who was his former aide, very close friend, published in the mid '70s. Yeah. And that was, honestly, it was an authorized biography, and I think it was more than an authorized biography. I think it really an autobiography in a lot of ways that Gus wrote in the third person, but it was really Jimmie Davis's autobiography. And so I used it, and there were areas where I tried to confirm whatever I used in the book, if I could confirm that this really happened. There were some interesting stories in there, but if you read my memoir, you're not going to get the whole story of me. You're going to get my perspective of me and me putting my best foot forward and all that. And so that's what Davis did. So it's a perspective, and I certainly it was certainly the first thing that I read when I started writing the book, because I needed to know what Davis thought about his own life and how he explained and rationalized what he did. But there was a lot that he just didn't talk about. He didn't really. I would love, if he was still alive, I would love to have asked him about his civil rights record in the '60s. I would love to have grilled him on the evidence that I had about whether he wrote the song or not. There was just a lot I would want to have asked him. But I thought the book it's a really entertaining, well-written book, and I think to me the most valuable part of it was his the descriptions he gave of his early childhood, the poverty that he grew up in rural Jackson Parish was interesting, because they were eking out a meager living in that little, and if you're ever up in North Louisiana and you're driving like to Ruston, and you're near Jonesboro, it's a very short detour off the highway between Alexandria and Ruston to the little community of Beach Springs, which is right near Hodge, and Quitman and Hodge, and Quitman, right, closer to Quitman, and there's the Jimmie Davis Tabernacle is there. And his boyhood home is on this property, and the cemetery behind the tabernacle where Davis is buried is right there. It's a really interesting little slice of Louisiana history. But the home, the little meager 4-room home that modest, unpainted 4-room home that he was born and raised in, is still there on that property, and it's worth a quick visit. Thanks for the question. Yes, sir.
Not just in Louisiana, but in the world or the country, Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
You feel right now that the political construction ceasing. What is your ideology right now? What would you call yourself?
What would I call my ideology right now?
Yeah, whether you're Republican, Democrat, what do you think?
Oh, I'm an unabashed liberal. I've never made any bones about it. So that would be what I'd be a registered Democrat and a liberal. My ideology would be liberalism, I guess. Yeah. So, but I've never pretended to be otherwise. and one of the reasons why I like this other side of being able to write history is that I can kind of leave a lot of that on the side and just, you know, because I mean, when I'm writing about Louisiana politics in the 40s, there was no, people don't realize I'm writing about this 1940 governor's election in my new book. I'm having to make sure, it hit me the other day. I got to explain to readers that there was really no Republican Party in the state in those days. The big election was the Democratic primary, and but there were parties. There was the anti-Long Party and the pro-Long Party. That was the political landscape of the state for 30, 40 years. It wasn't about Republican Democrat until, you know, Dave Treen gets elected governor. It really was a very significant Republican Party in the state in many ways. It was pro-Long, anti-Long, and it wasn't about whether you're Democrat or Republican. It was about whether you liked Huey Long or not. And strangely, it wasn't even about Huey Long's in the 1940 race. Both sides were campaigning to continue all the stuff that Long had built. There was almost no disagreement between both sides about whether we should keep all the social programs, the roads, the bridges, all that Long had built. It was really about whether we should tolerate the corruption of Dick Lesh and Earl Long, or move forward with more reform and put in, you know, civil service system and all of that. But it was almost like this complete unanimity in this state around the ideology of Long and what he wanted to do to, you know, bring Louisiana into the 20th century. It's just really interesting. We think we've had a lot of partisan politics in the state, and it has been, but it's usually been it was almost always among Democrats and not among Republicans until the latter part of the 20th century.
Well, some things have changed in our road. He was so good at working across the aisle.
Yep. Yep.
No matter where he went, common sense, well, I don't care what you say, he was that about it. And he made sure people followed him.
The comment was about my former boss, John Breaux, who was very bipartisan and brought people together, and he definitely did. Yes. Thank you for saying that.
Bob, Jimmie Davis in the 60s was governor in Louisiana at the same time. Orville Faubus was in Arkansas, and George Wallace was in Alabama. And there were some others, Lester Maddox was governor in Georgia, Ross Barnett in Mississippi.
Yep.
How was he influenced by them? They're all viewed as racist.
Yep.
And even though some view him in that way,
Yeah.
he has been less tarnished by the
Yes, he has. So the question was, there was in the 60s in Davis' second term, civil rights era, and all these segregationist governors around us in Arkansas and Mississippi and Alabama and beyond are making a lot of news, and, you know, George Wallace in Alabama, Ross Barnett in Mississippi, and Orville Faubus in Arkansas are making a lot of national news, and they're national figures mainly because of their pro-segregation stance. And what was surprising to me is that no state passed more pro-segregation legislation during that period than Louisiana. Jimmie Davis signed 135 pro-segregation bills when he was governor, and you know, was his stance on against segregation of the New Orleans public schools, for example, in 1960, made national news, and it was probably the part of his public record that's the least admirable part of his public record. And yet, he did not suffer the slings and arrows of the national media as much as he did quite a bit actually, but not nearly as much as the others did. And I think it goes, for me, it went back to this song that he wrote, that he claimed he wrote, and the song that he sang, and the other music that he made, protected him, inoculated him from some of the worst criticism that people like Wallace and Faubus and Barnett were receiving, because they were viewed only as politicians, whereas Jimmie Davis was viewed. And by the way, by the time Jimmie Davis gets elected governor in 1960, he's gone from singing salacious music to hillbilly music to being the most prominent singer of gospel music in the country. And so he recreated himself, and I think that the image of him as a gospel singer, a man of God, and all of that really protected him from being seen as this sort of mean-spirited politician, which is the way that a lot of people around the country viewed Wallace and others. The other thing that was interesting to me in the book, I devote a whole chapter to this, to sort of the rehabilitation of the song, because Davis didn't escape criticism, but a lot of the criticism about Davis's civil rights record was directed at "You Are My Sunshine." It became sort of, the song becomes associated as the anthem of a segregationist governor. And the song begins, when people criticize Davis, they criticize the song in the same breath. And so the song is suffering because of that. And it's fascinating that in 1962 is when Ray Charles decides to record 2 albums of country music. And one of those songs, and one of the biggest hits on the album that he records, it was the second of the 2 albums, one of the biggest hits on that album was Ray Charles's reinvention of "You Are My Sunshine." So some people have interpreted that to be, sort of that Ray Charles was making a statement about, sort of a musical sit-in a way, and reappropriating the anthem of a segregationist governor and reinventing it and making it his own. And that may have been what happened. Ray Charles was kind of ambivalent about that interpretation of it. Jimmie Davis, by the way, loved it because it made him a lot of money. The royalties that he got off of that song, which was probably the biggest hit of "You Are My Sunshine," was Ray Charles's version in 1962, made him a ton of money, and so he was perfectly happy to have Ray Charles come in and reinvent his song. Yes, sir.
I don't mean to be real personal about this, but a lot of us were disappointed in your departure at LSU. Might you ever consider coming back and teaching?
Well, thank you for saying that, Rand. The question is about my departure from LSU and whether I would go back to teaching. I'm very happy in retirement, and one reason is that it's for the first time in my life. My full-time job is writing, and I've got this little office that the library has given me that I go down in the mornings and I write for 4 or 5 hours, and I have nothing else to do but write. I can devote every day to writing, and that's never been my experience. It's always been on the side. When I was working for Senator Breaux, or when I was even teaching at LSU, it was always just part of the job. And now it's my full-time job, and I really love the freedom just to be a writer. The other side of it is, and I was having this conversation at my table before I got up here, was that things are so acrimonious on this campus and other places that as some of you may know, the governor before he was governor, when he was Attorney General, he tried to get LSU to punish me, fire me, reprimand me for some stuff that I had said about him. And I'm glad that I'm retired and enjoying my writing instead of hiring lawyers to try to save my job, which Ken Levy and other faculty members around the country are. So I wanted to go out on my own terms and not be forced out of the job by the governor. I'm happy that I was able to retire when I did. But thanks for your kind words, Randy. I appreciate that.
Still, the same thing you talking about, the way things are going now, and high level of some of these things are going. Does any of your mind ever change a little bit that you're not as liberal as they are?
He's trying to talk me into being conservative over here.
I'm an open
And
I got folks on both sides.
no, I would say, honestly, to be quite honest with you, what's happening in our country right now, and especially in Washington, has persuaded me that more so than ever that what I believe in as far as how the government ought to treat the poorest among us, the immigrant, the children, poor people in general, has been strengthened because I'm a Christian, very active Methodist. My wife and I are very active in our church, and she's got a seminary degree, and so we spend a lot of our time working with our church. And I believe that we need to, this country and our society needs to many people need to rediscover. Many people who talk about their Christianity need to rediscover that and maybe think harder about the words and teachings of Jesus, because I think we're in danger of neglecting a lot of that to jeopardy of our souls. So no, I have not. I think it's only strengthened what I believe. But thank you for the question, Linda.
Would you comment about students being arrested and handcuffed on campus?
So the question is about the students who were protesting the other day at the search committee for the LSU president, who were arrested and handcuffed, and one of them was taken to the parish prison, I believe. I was telling somebody just this morning that if I had been that student and the night before a friend or a parent or somebody said, so what is your best case scenario for what could happen to you tomorrow? I would say, I hope they arrest me and take me to the prison. Because I mean, that's what civil disobedience and those kind of protests are for. I wrote a whole book about the civil rights movement, and the strength of the civil rights movement was, I mean, when Martin Luther King and other civil rights leaders showed up in places like Birmingham and Selma, they did not want to be ignored. In fact, King and his movement chose Selma because they chose Selma and Birmingham because they thought that those were two really violent sheriffs who would attack them. They had gone to Albany, Georgia before that, and there was a sheriff there who just let them have their marches and let them have their protests, didn't arrest them and everything, and they were disappointed. They were like, we didn't come here to be ignored. We came here to get arrested because we want to bring national attention to what we're doing. So they in Birmingham, they got a really stupid, ignorant, violent police chief, Bull Connor, who played right into their hands. And so when I saw what LSU did, I thought, well, I just thought, my first thought was Bull Connor. Like that, they just behave like if you want to fuel the fire, if you want to give the students or the protesters what they want, arrest them, drag them off in chains, and throw them in jail, because that's what they wanted. Now, I'm not, I don't know everything about what they said and how everything went in that protest, but I do know this, that any protester worth his or her salt dreams of something like that happening to them, because it draws a lot of attention. If they had just gone and given a 3-minute speech and walked out, we would not be talking about this now. None of you would have heard about a thing that happened at that committee meeting the other day. The only reason we're talking about it, the only reason that everybody in town knows about it, is the young people got themselves arrested, and that's what they wanted. And so, as someone who respects civil disobedience and understands that if you do it, you've got to be willing to suffer the consequences. You're going to break the law. There's a law and tradition. Thoreau wrote a lot about this. If you're going to do it, you got to be prepared to suffer the consequences. But it's those consequences that often bring attention and sympathy to the cause. And so I'm not here to comment so much on the righteousness or not of their cause, but the tactics were right out of the playbook.
This reminds me.
Last question.
This reminds me of Bill Dodd when he attacked, mudslung at Jimmie Davis. And,
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Claiming that he did everything but crucify him on the cross. But I was bullied when I was a kid, and I'm growing up and I'm learning a lot, and I'm reading Proverbs in the Bible, learn Proverbs in the Bible. And to me, Jimmie was a very good example.
Yeah.
And myself, because I was tagging the paper, and they say when they attack you, that is a blessing and a favor, because it's like free advertisement, and it proves that you got your point across and that you're important. And I just learned that late in life.
Yeah.
And that, look who rose to the top, number one.
Yeah.
Jimmie Davis.
Yeah, Davis would not respond in kind to Bill Dodd and others. Bill Dodd yeah.
said he was the best governor around.
Yeah. Well, they came to be good friends. But Davis did show how that works. That if you just ignore the charge, it probably will be ignored, and it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a lot to learn, and it's a blessing from a bully like these kids.
You're not a bully, Susie. You're a bully. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Thank you all so much.
Hey, take a picture. Last time I got all. Yes, sir.